develop and can work on in a given amount of time. 3 possible infrastructures: the 2-lane road, the city street, and the interstate. We usually associate the term infrastructure with transportation systems. The term actually has its roots in the military. Infrastructure is the whole system required to support the use of troops. Also, the term infrastructure used to refer to the structure of an organization. When we think about how teams are supposed to transform ideas into improvements, we find that the transportation analogy works quite well. What is your traffic flow of ideas? How quickly can your organization transform ideas into lasting improvements? Do activities related to idea conversion happen daily? And are they built into everyone's job? Answering these questions can help you clarify the effectiveness of your current performance improvement infrastructure. To help you in this process, it may be useful to use the following transportation analogies. Okay, so the slowest idea conversion groups are your 2-lane country roads. Travel on this type of road is often unrestricted, congestion is low, and there aren't stoplights to slow you down. This is like your work teams. Traffic's always present, but it's moving at a consistent rate. Work teams do put improvements in place, but they tend not to be step change type improvements, and their rate of idea conversion is consistent but slower than it often could be. Now, project teams are more like city streets. When the lights are green, a lot of progress is made. When the lights are red, for example, resources are limited, no traffic flow takes place. In a similar sense, project teams make progress when they have the skills and the time and the financial support devoted to projects. Ideas get held up when the team is lacking in these investment areas. You can add lanes, in other words, add teams in an attempt to increase flow, but if you've still got stoplights, you're going to continue to halt idea flow. Infrastructure design features. Types of teams, number of teams, members per team, skill base and training plan, support group involvement, meeting times, duration, and frequency, desired outcomes and expectations, expected evolution of the team process. Interstates. These are highway systems with no stoplights and lots of lanes. Sometimes traffic flow is not a problem, but there are those times a day. We call that rush hour, when traffic can come to a dead stop. Still, these transportation systems are the most efficient of the 3 described here. They're analogous to the combined use of work teams and project teams. Work teams provide the daily incremental improvements, and project teams provide the innovations necessary for significant jumps or step changes in performance. Just as there is no perfect, smoothly flowing traffic system, there is no one team infrastructure design that does not have the potential for bottlenecks. Bottlenecks can come from poorly trained team leaders, poorly trained team members, poorly defined project scopes, and inadequate support in terms of time away from the daily job for project work. The goal is to minimize the likelihood of bottlenecks occurring and minimize the duration of the bottlenecks when they occur, just like reducing downtime in a work process. And so the 8 infrastructure design features presented in this lesson are analogous to deciding how many lanes a freeway needs to have, how closely the on and off ramps should be placed together because that affects flow, and when construction on the freeway should occur because that will give us capacity but will also slow us down for a short period of time. Ignoring these team infrastructure design features or discounting the potential impact that they can have, and you'll find that ideas will not flow into improvements nearly as fast as you would like them to. So all organizations have idea flow rates, idea conversion rates. And the design of your team infrastructure, along with the skills of your people in terms of project work and daily work process work, that's what determines your flow rates. When a traffic system is designed, its planners base their decisions on how many cars need to move through it in a given period of time. As you develop your team infrastructure, the same degree of thoughtful planning should be used. Now, the goal is not to go as fast as you can. You want to optimize flow of ideas and conversion with increases of engagement and ownership on the soft side of things. So keep the concept of idea conversion rates and the traffic flow of ideas in mind as we begin to explore infrastructure designs and investments. The traditional team infrastructure. Step 1, select team approach. Many people would have you believe that a 7-step problem-solving process is better or worse than a 5-step one, or that using the Tiger Team or Kaizen team approach is superior to using quality circles. When you boil each team type approach down, however, it's usually made up of the 5 steps shown in this diagram. So we select our team approach, and the constraint is approach options are often rarely researched and treated as the same. So we don't talk about a lot of the things we've already covered in this lesson. Then we make a mistake when we provide training. Conventional wisdom suggests that a company kick off its improvement effort with intensive multi-day training once the team approach has been selected. Okay, so we're going to have Kaizen teams. Anyone that wants to be on a Kaizen team, sign up at the Human Resources office. And once we've got our group selected, we're going to have a multi-day training session to kick the whole thing off. Most of the training time is often invested in lecture. We don't make a distinction between training that is for creating awareness versus training that needs to be used to develop new skills. People don't remember a whole lot from that big kickoff multi-day, and then they go about trying to do the right thing with a limited understanding of the tools. So they make their best effort, but their efficiency at a minimum is compromised, and the potential for effective tool application is kind of low. Well, that's the next mistake. And then the third mistake we make is that when we identify projects, we often go through the process of identifying way more projects than we have time to work on. I've seen 2 and 3 years worth of projects easily generated by either the consulting groups or the teams themselves. Unfortunately, we give little consideration to the resource demands of our current projects, our current job, and other ongoing or existing workplace improvement activities. And so we way overestimate what we're capable of doing. This raises expectations that the change is going to happen faster than it does. And when the change doesn't occur that quickly, people lose faith in the improvement effort. Forming teams seems like a quick, easy thing to do. It's a great way for management to demonstrate they're serious about empowerment and improvement. And a lot of times, instead of giving thought to what projects are suitable for teams and which aren't, we just give them all to the newly formed teams. Even worse, we rarely take action to ensure the effectiveness of existing teams or that each team has a skilled team leader. I have seen it go this crazy. Oh, goodness, we need to have a team-based improvement approach. Anyone that wants to be on a team, sign up at Human Resources. Great, let's take the signed up people, run them through the training. All right, now that we've ran through the training, everybody pick a project and start working on it. And we'll go from there. That's how it went. That's how it still goes in a lot of cases. And you're just massively sub-optimized. So given the factors presented here, is it any wonder that the degree of team success is often much lower than we expected? How many problems really get solved? How much does it take to put a high-impact improvement in place? 6 months, 9 months, a year? And so if we consider these factors up front, we can put a much better, effective project team infrastructure in place. Building a project team infrastructure. So how many teams do you need? How many teams can you support? Most engineering departments have a very well-designed project team infrastructure. There's many organizational types out there where industrial engineering departments, systems engineering departments, process engineering departments, a combination of the three, where they drive continuous improvement in the organization. Developing projects represents a high percentage of their work time, if not all of their work time. Successful project completion represents effective process cycles. They're just long-term cycles. Most people don't use a majority of their work time to work on projects. That's not how most folks are. That's how engineers are. Instead, most people spend the bulk of their time executing work processes in the value stream or work processes that support the value stream. There's not as much time spent working on project teamwork or focus teamwork. They're working on process work teamwork. In high-performance organizations, each employee is on at least two teams, their work team plus one other. Their primary team, where the bulk of their work time in teams is spent, is their work or process team. Their second team is either a focus team like a safety committee or a quality committee, or a project team. Most focus teams, such as safety committees, planning teams, and leadership teams, are supported by project teams, or the focus teams keep track of what the different project teams that affect their performance focus are doing. Successful project completion requires the system changes necessary to support continuous process improvement and step change innovation implementation. We need both types of change. Work teams give us the continuous improvement. Project teams give us step change innovation. But any person can be on any type of team. It's not a title-dependent thing. In turn, successful project teams help drive the rate of organizational improvement and change that is realized. Their effectiveness is critical to achieving the defined strategic goals and objectives. The key is how effectively do we support them, and that is the challenge in so many companies. We don't effectively support our project teams or our focus teams. Too many organizations make the mistake of forming more project teams than they can effectively support, mainly in terms of team leader capacity, but also in terms of engineering capacity, major expense funding, time away from work funding, training support. Just because a long list of potential improvements can be identified does not mean such a list can be easily addressed. It's easy to define years' worth of possible work in a brainstorming session, especially a well-facilitated one. It's much more difficult to build an infrastructure of project team leaders and members that can support a high volume of improvement needs. Developing an effective project team infrastructure. The flow diagrams that we just looked at represent a modified but hopefully more effective and realistic approach to putting formal project teams in place. Time availability and project needs are the two central focal points of this diagram. If the content of this diagram is considered, no more teams are formed than there is a need for and can be effectively supported. Additionally, consideration is given up front as to what this support will cost. This action is necessary not to prevent teams from being formed, but to keep benefit expectations in check with the added cost of having a formal project team process. So time away from work costs labor dollars. Supporting teams often requires major expense monies, might take away from other projects. What are we going to get for these additional investments? Also notice that only projects that are suitable for teams and a high priority are considered in these flow diagrams. Some projects that are put in place primarily individuals, and some projects that are put on hold are set off on the side until higher priority projects can be completed. Okay, so we'd love to give everything to teams, but we don't have the capacity, so individuals will take those that we can't table for now, and others will go into the parking lot. By using this logic, team efforts are integrated into the larger organizational improvement mix instead of each department just trying to take care of their own stuff. Alignment is more likely as teams better know their role in helping the value stream, the company, improve. Expectations for project completion dates, meeting frequencies, and meeting duration should also be defined. When you take this step, it allows support costs to be estimated. It helps you gain commitment up front for the types of support that teams will need. You're not going to blindside a leader with an unexpected cost in their budget that now they've got to explain. You can also use different combinations of expectations and costs to examine alternative team infrastructure designs prior to putting them in place. Now, similar to the GE Six Sigma approach, with this modified approach, teams are not allowed to randomly select their own projects. They are given the latitude to select possible angles for solving a problem or improving a process, but there are project selection criteria. Keep in mind that this diagram does not say who determines project priority, who determines the selection criteria. You're going to have a steering committee. Who you put on the steering committee, on the leadership committee, that's up to you. But all employees from each organizational level should be involved somehow. They give some kind of feedback, either through social media or through an idea board, or maybe they're actually on a team. But employees from all organizational levels should be involved in this pre-work as long as they're properly kept up to date with emerging trends inside and outside of the workplace and with the key operational costs of the processes they're trying to improve. They must know that the balance that needs to exist between rate of improvement and the need to manage the existing process effectively. This flow diagram is only the front end of an improvement effort. Once the process is kicked off and the initial teams start working on projects, the process is no longer linear. It's part of the improvement system. Each team's moving at its own rate. Some projects take less time than others. Some will be dropped. As projects are completed, teams may disband. Some teams may pick the next project. Think about what that does to forming, storming, norming, and performing. Lastly, time availability for team involvement will shift. If it's a seasonal business, a lot of organizations do their team improvement time during the slow business. And once we're busy, we don't have time for teams. We'll pick that back up when we slow down again. Nothing wrong with that. The investment over time is the same. But because time availability shifts over time, you could end up with different leaders and different team members as time progresses. Now, to support your team process, you need a key project database at each site. You can't be having sub-optimization where individual departments work off of their own list while the team works off of a site list. Put every improvement for the site in a common data set, and then you can filter out from there. All staff should have the ability to submit well-defined ideas for improvement that are aligned with the goal of the site. And this is not just a fill-in-the-blank thing. They should have to select which goals will the idea impact. What's the estimated cost? What's the estimated benefit? And they can be benefits from drop-down menus. But make them at least make selections. Make them think about what will the project do. And that's any person submitting an idea. Performance information, including cost, should be shared across the organization to help facilitate good prioritization decisions. And again, they don't have to be exact numbers. They can be ballpark numbers. They can be estimations. They can be percentages. But give people something that gives them perspective in terms of where time is best spent when we go to make improvements. My experience has taught me that investments must consistently be made in 4 key areas to support a team process. These 4 key investment areas will be our next focal point in this workbook, and we are going to look at those in Lesson 10. They form the basis for the work team and project team support assessments that are provided for your use. How do you measure team potential? As you develop current and future team expectations, what factors do you consider to be important? What have other teams done? What are the organization's needs? What skills do the team have? What skills does the team need to have? What resources are you willing to invest? The output of a project team is not necessarily cost savings, but instead, it's an implemented improvement. If the team selects the right project to develop, cost savings will be realized, either directly or indirectly. The project has to pay for itself. The focus, however, should be on helping teams select the right project that will impact the desired key performance areas and then provide that team with the necessary support to get the desired improvement in place quickly and in a quality manner. Don't just assign something to a team, turn them loose, and then criticize them when they don't get things done quickly enough. They have to have support. Once you've decided that clearly defined expectations and team effectiveness go hand in hand, you can then begin to think about what possible expectations for your teams might be. You should have both general and team-specific expectations. So, for example, follow the problem-solving process thoroughly might be a general expectation. A specific expectation might be stated as, put a trial system in place within 2 months. I give you a worksheet in the workbook to help you define possible team expectations. General expectations tend to be related to the project development process. Specific expectations tend to be more results-oriented. Both types of expectations are needed to help the team define what their challenge is, to help management determine what types of support are needed, and to help measure the level of team effectiveness that exists in the organization. How will you measure team effectiveness? It's recommended here that project cycle time and impact be two of the first key measures that are used to define team results expectations for project teams. There's also additional examples in the workbook exercise of both general and specific expectations for both project and work teams. The challenge is not as much as to identify the measures as it is to select realistic output levels for each measure. What are your team processes capable of? What are your baselines for project and work team output? Project teams. Of the two measures just mentioned, only project cycle time is actually related to team output. Project cycle time is contingent upon 1, the amount of support provided to each team, 2, the complexity of the project, and 3, the project development skills that exist within each team. If more teams are in action than the organization can effectively support, several, if not all, of the teams will suffer. If certain skills are lacking in the team members won't be able to use their limited time in each meeting or between meetings effectively. Your output baseline should consider the potential effects of these 3 factors: amount of support provided, project complexity, and project development skills within the team. Prior to defining output baselines, you first need to determine how many key projects the organization needs to complete in a given time frame. Let strategy guide your team output baselines. Most companies have more defined improvement needs than they have the people power to develop and implement them. That is why suggestion systems often create a backlog that is difficult to control. It's easy to come up with ideas. It's much more challenging to evaluate and put those ideas in place. Since time resources are limited, it's important to teach staff how key projects are prioritized and selected. Otherwise, when you turn down their ideas, they will just see it as a discount, and not the good kind. After you've defined your project completion needs, and this is normally during the creation of an annual site operating plan, you need to make a key distinction. Which projects would benefit from being assigned to a team? Which projects are better suited for individuals to complete? And you could even put these on a spectrum: pure individual, pure team, somewhere in between. We often make the mistake of assigning too many projects to teams and wonder why they are not getting completed soon enough. The problem is not always or even usually the team. Bottlenecks in the team support infrastructure are often to blame for poor team performance. And you can use the surveys I provide in the workbook to check yourself out. Where do you have strengths in terms of team support? Where do you have opportunities for improvement in terms of team support? We always want buy-in and increased ownership. But teams aren't always a solution. Some problems from a business perspective simply require quicker implementation than many teams can provide. There's also cases when an organization is limited as to the number of active teams it can support at any given time. We can't pull a team off of a project, so an individual has to take it. If too many teams are activated, their effectiveness suffers as resources such as trainers, facilitators, leaders, and even willing skilled members become too thinly stretched. As you develop your own team output baselines, think about the factors that will influence project cycle time. After you do that, begin to discuss possible output rates. For example, many quality circle programs have an output rate of 1 or 2 significant projects per year. Kaizen teams, on the other hand, are expected to complete their projects in as little as a few days. The people hours is often very similar math-wise, but do the math. Should you design your team infrastructure similar to those that support effective Kaizen teams? Do you need that greater rate of project completion? How will your output expectations vary as project complexity or impact increases? How soon are the improvements needed? Do you have seasonality to work with? Do you have periods of downtime that might prove to be advantageous? Work teams. The process for setting work team baselines is totally different than the one described above for project teams. The output of work teams is process-driven. Process baselines are based on measurable factors such as efficiency percentages, quality levels, morale levels, on-time delivery percentages, patient satisfaction levels, medical error rates. The design of these processes that each work team uses dictates the potential results that the team can obtain. The processes exist for a reason. They convert inputs into outputs. Then the outputs are either taken by the customer or used by another process to turn into its own outputs. In turn, work team performance should be based on a balanced scorecard of measures and on the process capabilities of the work systems they're trying to improve. You can heighten the probability of your work teams improving their key processes by providing them with key performance data, giving them tools for solving problems on the fly, such as troubleshooting job aids, and allowing them to participate on project teams because they will learn during those team experiences. You should not expect work teams to improve their own processes significantly, if at all. If all you're going to do is ask them to work harder, pay more attention to detail, and avoid making mistakes. A process gives you what it's designed to give you. If you want different work results, you have to change the work process. Example infrastructure blueprint. This is a team infrastructure blueprint, and it represents a basic team infrastructure for a 100-person food manufacturer. In the example, the organization has all 3 team types in place. And so if you look across the columns, you'll see we have some work teams, we have some focus teams, and then we have some project teams. This organization has 10 work teams, 6 focus teams, and 7 project teams for a total of 23 active teams. An organization with this type of infrastructure for 100 people would be considered to be fairly mature from a team infrastructure design perspective because of the degree of engagement that exists. The next key question to ask is, how effective are each of these teams? So it's one thing to build the teams, it's another thing for them to produce. Note that with this type of infrastructure for a 100-person company, either 23% of the employees have team leadership skills, or some people lead more than one team. Right? Because there's 23 different teams, 100 people. In my experience, the latter is typically the case. People lead more than one team, and some leaders attempt to lead as many as 4 or 5 teams, and even experienced team leaders, that is a struggle. That's risky, that's excessive. Even the best team leader can easily lose their focus if they're trying to keep too many teams active, and especially if those teams are making steady progress over time. It's just too tough to balance. And if you have a regular job, it's even harder. This blueprint shows how the workforce is deployed across the different team and team types. And so notice if we go down the rows, we've got the different departments. And if we go across a row for a department, you can see how that department is engaged with different types of teams. And so for the left-hand third of the infrastructure blueprint, you can see the number of people in each department, and then you can see department participation on focus teams, and then department participation on project teams. Your goal over time should be to obtain a good mix of people from different functional groups and levels across all of your teams. And so the example shown here is meant to be a best practice. If your site has fewer than 60 or so people, I prefer to set this blueprint up using the names of the folks or the employee numbers of the folks, depending on confidentiality, as the rows instead of using departments. And then I can manage the number of teams each person is on and identify where engagement gaps exist. Keep in mind, this tool can be site-specific, it can be organization-wide, you can have individual tables that roll up into larger ones. There's a lot you can do with this initial blueprint once it's been created. So I give you an exercise for creating your team infrastructure blueprint, and it's a very basic exercise. Name your process or work teams, name your focus teams, name your project teams. So give that a try. I hope that you enjoyed Lesson 9. There's a whole lot to cover in Lesson 9 relative to using teams to drive improvement, but hey, it's a very important thing in high-performance organizations. Lesson 10, we'll look at the value of effective team support. We've talked about that a lot. Now we're going to get down to the actual 4 types of investment team support and give you some ways to assess the degree to which you're currently supporting your teams. Good luck as you define your team infrastructures, and I'll look forward to working with you further in Lesson 10. Keep improving.